So I want to bring you all together today so that we could just go over the Texas First program. Um, what we'll do is, first of all, I want to ask you all to, if you can, make sure that you silence your speakers so that to reduce background noise. And also, if you could hold your questions because we won't have anyone fielding questions like we normally do throughout the presentation. So if you could just hold them until we finish, and then I'll try to get to as many as I can afterwards, and then take care of anyone else after that. Um, in our normal way of handling our questions through our contact us and so forth. So for now, we'll get going. Thank you all for joining. The Texas First program, uh, it consists of two components, the diploma and the scholarship. So we'll quickly go through both of those. Um, the diploma is not our area of expertise, so I won't go through the diploma and component in detail. But what I have done is I'll give you a little bit of information and contact info so you'll know where to go if you get questions. The Texas First program in its entirety, the purpose is to promote efficiency in the state public education system and to encourage the enrollment of high performing students at eligible institutions within the state. The Texas First program diploma enables eligible students to graduate early with a distinguished level of achievement and receive a scholarship for 1 or 2 semesters. So I'll talk a little bit more about that as I get to that scholarship component. The Texas First program, that diploma component, I have here, and you all, of course, I'll publish this or get make sure you all can have a copy. The program criteria for the diploma, I have here the uh, program rules, the statute. I have also provided some resources just so you can familiarize yourself with it. Like I said, we're not, it's not our area of expertise, but what happens with the diploma, if you have a student come to you, parent, anyone ask you questions, hey, I want to graduate early. What's this first diploma thing? I've had students ask me that. How do I get this? The first thing we do is refer them to talk to their high school counselor. Their high school counselor are going to be the ones to determine their eligibility for this program to see if they can graduate early with that Texas First diploma. So that's the very first thing I tell students, see your counselor. Um, if counselors have questions about how to determine eligibility, the counselors, they can reach out to us. That's when we provide them with Suzanne Morales Vale. We provide them with her contact information, or students and high school counselors, parents, anyone that has questions about their students or their children being eligible to graduate early can email cri@highered.texas.gov, or they can contact Suzanne directly. So we'll make sure you have this information. Um, High school counselors with questions regarding the CCMR and accountability. We also, TEA has provided the curriculum email that they can reach out to. So these are just resources for anyone coming to you saying, what do I do if I want to graduate with that Texas First diploma? So what I'll do now is go more in detail about the Texas First Scholarship. It does enable students to receive a scholarship for either 1 or 2 semesters at an eligible institution. This scholarship is determined um, based on whether a student graduates by 1 or 2 semesters or more um, early. So it depends on how early they graduate. But before we get to that, we'll talk about eligible institutions. Currently, there are only 10 institutions that are designated as either a public research university or a public emerging research university. Um, and this is defined in the Texas Education Code under Title III, Section 61.003. So the 10 eligible institutions that can participate at this time, I have them listed here. Texas A&M University, Texas State University, Texas Tech, the University of Texas at Arlington, University of Texas at Austin, the University of Texas at Dallas, the University of Texas at El Paso, if I can talk today, the University of Texas at San Antonio, University of Houston, and University of North Texas. This is current. We all know that we are in legislative session. Things could change. So keep your eyes open for that. But we're talking current. Student eligibility. So the way a student currently um, can qualify for a scholarship, the student must be enrolled at one of those eligible institutions. They have to be a Texas resident. They have to be registered for selective service or be exempt. And they have to have graduated um, with that Texas First diploma. So what that means is their counselor or school administrator must have deemed them eligible to graduate with that Texas First diploma before they can be considered eligible to receive the scholarship. So that's why when a student comes to me or calls in, I'm like, the first thing you need to do, and I've had students say, "Hey, I'm eligible for this scholarship. I've already looked at it. I've looked at the terms, and and I've had many students say that, and I'm like, "Have you talked to your counselor? Are you graduating early?" No. So refer them back to their counselor to see if they can graduate early with that Texas um, first diploma. Now, once they have been deemed eligible to graduate early, they have all their ducks in a row. They talk to their counselor. The counselor has said, "Yep, you meet all the criteria. You are graduating early. Everything is set in stone for that student." Once they've done that, the student um, there's nothing else that the student needs to do for us. And when I say us, the THECB, I've had students call me and say, "Well, can I just send you some information? Can I send you a copy of this or that?" And we've had some students send in some things. So, but no, at this point, the counselor or administrator, once they verify that the student meets all those eligibility requirements, they have to confirm the that the student is eligible, and they can do that by submitting the Texas First Diploma Eligibility Confirmation Form. Now, this is an online form that we have already that our agency has submitted, has put out there for high school counselors and um, to see and to access. We've also given this information over to TEA so they can also submit this information or send it out to the school districts. So once they deem a student eligible, they can confirm that student's eligibility by completing that eligibility form. Once we receive that and and the boxes are checked, we will then issue that student or all eligible students a certificate of eligibility that indicates the amount of state credit a student has available to use if they enroll in one of those eligible institutions. So that's the process that's happening now. Students, counselors, and um, administrators are submitting the confirmation forms now for students who they who has been deemed eligible for graduating with that Texas First diploma. The amount of the state credit that's issued is contingent on the number of semesters a student graduates early. The maximum annual two-semester Texas grant award amount for the applicable academic year, that's determined annually by the THECB. Most of you probably are may be aware that every year we send out those maximum award amounts to the institutions. So whatever that annual maximum award amount for the Texas grant is, and it could change from year to year, but the annual two semester, that maximum semester amount, that's what this scholarship is based upon. So I'm going to go a little deeper into that. So a student who graduates high school 2 or more semesters early, the state credit that's offered to the student will equal the total amount of a maximum annual two-semester Texas Grant Award. If a student graduates 1 semester early, the state credit offered to the student will equal half of the total amount of a maximum annual two-semester Texas Grant Award. And I just want you to keep in mind that I'm saying the state credit offered to a student will equal the total amount. Um, or the state credit offered to a student will equal half of the total amount. And you'll see why when I move forward. When an institution has to apply that state credit, so if a student, we issue their certificate and they come to you and say, hey, this is this is what I have offered to me. Well, when you have to apply that state credit, the rule says that you must apply a state credit to the student's charges that is equal to the lesser of the amount of the state credit available to the student. So there's A, or the student's actual tuition, mandatory fees, and other costs of attendance at the institution. So you're going to apply the lesser of. It's not just the student gives you their certificate and says, hey, this is the amount of state credit I have. Apply all of my state credit. No, it's the lesser of. So which one is less? Their state credit or their actual tuition, mandatory fees, and other costs of attendance at your institution. So if their costs are lesser than that state credit, that's what you'll apply. Um, I do have a note that says the amount of state credit offered to a student may not be considered in the calculation of any state or institutional need based aid awards or the calculation of the student's overall financial need unless the combination of the credit and other federal, state, and institutional financial aid, excluding work study and loan programs, exceeds the student's estimated total cost of attendance. Basically, this is saying um, uh, when you apply that state credit or the lesser of, you you can't exceed the student's cost of attendance. So just keep that in mind. Also, I just want to let you all know that when you apply their state credit or the lesser of, if any portion of a state credit is unused, so say you apply the lesser of and a student has state credit left over because you didn't apply the full amount. So the remaining amount may be applied to subsequent semesters only if it's within the first academic year following the student's graduation from high school. And the reason being is because a student's eligibility is discontinued after or it expires at the end of the first academic year following that their graduation. So they have 1 year to use it. So if a student graduates in May of 2023, they have until May of 2024. So that's why they have 1 academic year. Now, once you apply that state credit for your eligible students, the THECB will reimburse each institution the amount of state credit um, during the preceding academic year. And it's the preceding academic year because the institution's annual FAD submission is what we'll use to calculate the reimbursement amount. We all know that FADS is, during that academic year, it's going to take, it'll be the following year for us to get those calculations. So that's why it says the preceding year, academic year. So after FADS is after we get those calculations from FADS, we'll have to then report those calculations to TEA for the reimbursement. And at that time, then we'll be able to reimburse institutions. Um, and I believe that is pretty much it for the content part. If you have questions, this is our contact information. Students, public, parents, feel free to give them our TFAC, Texas Financial Aid Information Center phone line. Institutions only can contact us at the 844-792-2640. Um, you can contact us anytime, 7 days a week, using our contact us form, online inquiry form. And then just a note that we are open Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, but we are closed daily from 12 to 1 for lunch. When you submit a contact us form, just a few things that we want you to remember. The receipt from is make sure that that's marked institution. I believe it comes up automatically with student or some other um, one of the other topics, but just be sure it's institution. Then you want to put your institution's name, contact reason, always input financial aid question, regardless of what you're contacting us about. That way it'll be routed to us. Your description, you can describe it. You'll have 4,000 characters or less to use. So just give us a clear and concise description for what you're needing. And although it's not, it doesn't have the red asterisk, not mandatory, please include your phone number because sometimes it's just easier um, if we have a question about your inquiry. All right. That was pretty short. I hope it was sweet. So now, if you all have questions, um, I can go ahead and take your questions, and we'll try to do one at a time. If you can either, I'm thinking just go ahead and talk. If you want to raise your hand, okay. I see Delisa.
Yeah, so a couple of questions. I have lots of questions, probably, but let me start with a couple. So, not that our school can't do this, but I'm just thinking about others. What if they couldn't float the money for a whole academic year? Like pay the students and not have funding for it. There's no option. They still have to wait until FADS to get and the close of the academic year to get reimbursed.
Um, yes, and it's written like that in statute. Uh,
Okay. Well,
I will now. I what I'll do is I'll inquire um with my management to see.
yeah. I
But
mean,
as far as I know, but I think Deshay is on. Let me defer to Deshay to see. Oh, she is. There she is.
yeah.
To see if she has an answer for that.
Well, considering I'm being recorded, I will
And
definitely
I'll stop the
answer this.
recording.
No, please continue.
Okay.
We do have other programs, newer programs that are similar to how Texas First is being set up. And so we are definitely going to look at ways because we do understand that as an institution, as you mentioned, Delisa, floating the funding up front and then being reimbursed on the back end based on reporting from FADS could be a little more challenging. And so we are looking at how can we provide funding based on other ways. Um, but more to come on what that would look like because this would be our first time having to use this particular approach with the FAD data being the reimbursement process. One thing that we would need to determine is the number of students that would be enrolled and awarded at your institution, and what other reporting mechanisms can we use to kind of provide that funding up front and then collect it on the back end from FADS. So that is one option that we're looking at as being FADS as far as the kind of reconciliation of what you should be reporting based on the funding that we would be giving up front. So hopefully, as we kind of work through the process of Texas First, we'll look at ways that we can kind of compromise out the funding process because the funding is with TEA. It's not actually with
Sure.
the coordinating board. So it's a little different when we're having to provide reporting to TEA in order for us to receive the funding at the agency and then receive the funding, provide that reimbursement to the institution. So that's the kind of multi-layer of how this funding is being operated currently.
Yeah, some of our accounting offices, they don't like our accounts running deficit. That's why I was asking that
I
too.
I understand.
Obviously, I don't think this program is going to be anywhere near, large dollar amounts, but just question on that. And I don't know,
No.
just offering some type of, um, suggestion maybe is if we could report to the coordinating board, our students and the dollar amounts, and maybe it could be a faster reimbursement process.
Right.
Just think of that. Um,
Yes.
and then the others, there was a slide about need, cost of attendance. Um, so I want to make sure if this program, if a student has Texas grant, if they go over need, can they do that? And there could be other programs too, some of the institutional programs we have, but I wasn't really understanding that one slide. In where it talked about exceeding cost of it, about not exceeding, yes. It says may not be considered in the calculation of any state or institutional need-based awards or the calculation of the student's overall financial need.
And that's the combination of the credit
So it's
and,
only if it exceeds cost of attendance.
yes, unless it exceeds cost of attendance.
So it's not financial need. Like if
No.
I have a student that has institutional funds,
Mhm.
Texas grant, and I give them this, they can,
Yes.
we don't have to go back and reduce some other state program or institutional programs. It's just about
Exactly.
cost. Okay,
Yes, it's
Right.
only about cost of attendance
okay.
Very
Take
similar
note.
to transfer grant,
for
if you
grant.
remember, how it was up to the cost of attendance, but not the need component.
Mhm.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Karen?
That's gonna get a little tricky with federal programs, if there are federal programs involved, because you're gonna have then some programs that are capped at need and at cost of attendance. Anyway, I applaud the idea, but it really makes it a little more complicated to deal with all of this. And I had a question too about the reimbursement, because I think our accounting folks are not gonna be terribly pleased if it's, a year and a half basically before we get funds. I can tell you, I will get dinged a number of times as to where's this money before it ever, or why is this account in arrears? And so that's just something to think about as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen.
Yeah, no, great point, Karen. Like I said, there is another program that is very similar to this type of reimbursement process that we're also looking at ways to provide funding sooner than later on the later end. So this will
And we
also be,
appreciate that. We
Yeah.
absolutely appreciate that.
because we are also working with those same accounting individuals who express the same concern. So yes.
I think we had a question from Beth, and I'm trying to keep everybody in order as I see the hands, and I apologize if I'm mixing the order.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in. I had the same concern that Karen had about it not being capped at federal need. As I understand, this is like a scholarship program, so it wouldn't be. But our other programs, the state ones, the set aside federal aid, are capped at federal need. And so I know with the transfer grant, that was gear funding, so there was a federal exclusion. But I'm just concerned about our ability to do that with our other need-based programs. So just reiterating what Karen said.
Yeah, that
Okay.
was my concern. And,
Yeah.
and I know some of you are PeopleSoft, some of you are Banner, but our systems don't work like that. It doesn't let us exclude. And I know, Deshae, you know, back in the day, right? And all that school, it doesn't work like that. It's
Yeah.
gonna be in that award in,
And for like SCOG and Stafford loans, the subsidized Staffords, the federal government wouldn't allow us to do it that way.
Okay. Thank you. This is good stuff for us to in mind. Nora?
Hi, I wanted to ask about clarification on the slide that you said is expiring soon. You said that any remaining credit can be shifted to the next term as long as it's within 1 year or 1 academic year. So let's say the student is a spring admit. Do they have until the next December, January to use it, or only until the end of August?
What they have is the scholarship expires 1 year following the student's graduation date, high school graduation date.
So if they graduate in
So-
December,
So if they graduate in December, then they have 1 year to use the scholarship. If it's December of 20, what are we now? 23? If they graduate December of 23, they would have until December of 24.
so then we're then crossing aid years, and potentially it's 2.5 years later before we reimbursed, because then that would be the next year's reporting.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
So, but when I tell you about, and just like with that slide, it expires. So if the student had monies left over, they still would have to use it within their 1 year. Does that make sense? Before the scholarship expires for that student.
Right, so it could cross
Okay.
8 years. It
Oh,
could,
yeah, for sure.
if they graduate in December
Mhm.
and they're
You're
here
correct.
for, let's say spring of 24,
Mhm.
then, and they have some leftover funding, then it could be fall of 24 before they use the remaining.
Exactly. No, you're
Okay.
right. Yes,
Okay.
ma'am. Thank you. Dee Dee?
I'm back on the need-based slide. And I think what
Sure.
I'm hearing too is that whole unless it exceeds cost of attendance, but
Yeah.
it says in there excluding work study and loans.
Uh-huh.
So
It did.
but how does that, so you're saying pull all loans and work study out of that cost of attendance calculation?
Okay. And see if you financially-
So only the need-based stuff is exceeding cost of attendance?
Yes. So you will exclude work study and loan programs when you're
Yeah.
considering this.
Yeah,
And
I don't.
do you remember it? Yeah, like this, it's the same concept that we issued out for transfer grant. I know.
Which was problematic.
Yeah.
as well.
Very.
And
Well,
so,
It's there's very few students that are going to have this and only this, right? And
Yeah.
all of our students are going to have federal aid as well. So we have to abide by
Yeah.
those rules, and we will be holding to need and cost of attendance.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, the thing is, we don't want to violate statutes or stuff, but there's no way to make the system work where we
Mhm.
get audited and the feds don't say, or SAO, the people that audit us say, you didn't resolve an over award because they're over need or they're over call. I mean, we just can't pull stuff out and not count it.
Gotcha. Okay. Beth?
Yeah, I was just gonna chime in again that with transfer grant, those exclusions were because it was gear funded. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to do that.
Thank you.
That's
And
just what I was gonna say, Beth, this is Karen. Because we were, that money was by federal regulation excluded,
Mhm.
all of that emergency money. This
Yeah.
doesn't fall under that, so I'm not sure that, well, I know we couldn't for any federal program, we will have to include this. We can't, I mean, VA benefits, we have a way to exclude those, not toward need, but that again is a federal regulation, but any of this, we won't be able to do that. So the only way this would apply is if the only thing the student had was funding through THGCB. But if they have anything federal, we're going to fall under the federal rules.
Okay. Thank you all for the input. Um, it's definitely good to know. Nora?
Not that I want there to be, but are there any academic progress requirements if a student were to receive 2 semesters credit in order to receive it for the first and the second semester? Or is it again like a scholarship? You've been provided with this credit, you will receive it regardless of enrollment or academic progress?
Mm,
There, oh, go ahead, Troy.
I was gonna say I'll look deeper into it, but I have not seen any.
Right, it's very similar to how you described for the
Yeah.
scholarship. And as Troy said, this is the challenges of administering the program on your end is good to hear. So when we have to kind of describe some of the challenges that the schools are having, because right now it's 10 eligible schools. effective September 1st, it opens it up to all public schools. If you all have been heavily involved into the legislative session that just, ended, and the bills that were passed, Texas First had some modifications to it, and one of the modifications to this statute was who would be considered as far as an eligible institution that a student could potentially receive the scholarship, and it no longer has it just as a research or emerging institution. It opens up to all public institutions. So you all will kind of be the first to be able to let us know the challenges and then be able to let all your colleagues know of those challenges
That is
as
true.
they as students may be able to enroll at other institutions outside of the 10 that were listed here. So
We were
it will help
Delisa,
when we're trying to describe, what some of the challenges may be, and determine if there are opportunities in the next session, if there are changes maybe within the statute or things that we can reconsider for the rules or things of that nature, as it's put into place. So
Delisa,
Yeah, has it determined, we were gonna try to set up accounts, but they said that they were trying to figure out if it was gonna be scholarship or grant. So on the state side, so my person who does all account setup contacted somebody and they said they'll have to get back to him, but we haven't heard back on what type of account for the
I
state.
will find out from our finance team
Okay,
because
perfect.
they're the ones who would probably know best to tell the universities how to best set it up on their end. So I'll reach back out to our financing. I think I was on that email to
Okay.
Lisa
yeah,
to
I
find out.
remember too.
Yeah.
Robert Clark.
On the one term versus two terms, and I apologize if I covered this, is that clearly shown in what we receive? Our admissions office is telling us that we already have a student that's eligible. And I don't think we have information on one versus two terms.
It's not necessarily clearly shown because probably a certificate hasn't been issued as of yet. So
Okay.
we just finalized the certification process, and we've gotten high school counselors who've submitted the required eligibility form, so we know who the students are. So we can issue out a certificate, and in that certificate we describe, up to how much the student could receive. So the certificate
Okay.
itself will say about
So
how much
so
the
those
student
haven't come out
could
yet.
receive, right? So the
Okay.
certificate itself hasn't gone out to
Okay.
anyone as of yet.
That's
We
helpful.
just,
I can tell them to hang
yeah,
on.
yeah, we just released it. I want to say maybe the week of the 6th. We got the process kicked off and sent out to the ISDs
Okay.
through our other division, who's sent out notifications. So
Thank you.
not a problem. And definitely feel free, Robert, to contact us after this and let us know maybe the potential student so we can see if we did receive information on that
Okay.
particular student already. So that would be helpful.
I'll do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Beth.
I apologized if you answered this before. So is the certificate going to the student and then the student turns it into us, or does it go to the school that they indicate?
It's going to the student, and then the
Okay.
student